everyone. My name is Mark Yevyo, and I'm Program Coordinator for the UC Davis Pre-Health and Pre-Medical National Conference. And I'd like to thank you for donating your time and coming in and being part of history here right now. First of all, I'd like to thank our wonderful sponsor for this conference, AAMC, for allowing us to broadcast this conference and this panel in particular globally. So, for the past 6 months, we have been collecting questions from undergraduate pre-vet students through our various social media platforms and our website. As a result, we will not be accepting questions from the audience. It is such an amazing honor moderating this panel today that puts a spotlight on veterinarians that treat avian and exotics, zoo animals, and fish. Whether it's treating patients with feathers, scales, or elephants, these amazing veterinarians represent vastly different fields of veterinary medicine, but have one thing in common: the passion for animals and their health. Here are the uncommon veterinarians.
All right. Hi there, my name is Dr. Jessie Sanders, and I am a mobile fish veterinarian out of Santa Cruz. I treat primarily fish in private homes and some public businesses. I work a lot with koi. I graduated from Tufts University back east in 2012, and I guess a fun fact about me is I just competed in the National Outrigger Canoe Championships down in Catalina.
Hi, I'm Dr. Curtis Singh. I'm a zoo veterinarian by trade. I've worked in zoos for about 25 years. I've also worked in lab animal medicine, but I started in private practice and did that for about 10 years. And my fun fact is I play volleyball, but not competitively like that.
My name is Serena Brenner, and I actually reside right here in Davis. My background is very eclectic. I've worked in small animal practice, dog, cat, and then small animal, avian, and exotic, as well as I am currently one of the associate vets at the California Academy of Sciences, so working in aquarium medicine, do a bunch of volunteer work at local zoos, as well as relief work, and I'm also an inspector for the Veterinary Medical Board, so a little bit of everything. And an interesting fact is I've always had a passion for designing and making jewelry, so I have my own jewelry design business on the side, and I always say it keeps my fine motor skills intact because it's very much like doing surgery.
Okay. Please welcome the uncommon veterinarians. Okay, so I'd like to open up the discussion with this very general talking point and question, and I'd like to start with Dr. Sanders again. So, most children who become veterinarians report that they always wanted to be veterinarians, with most having made their career choice by 9 years of age. When did you decide to become a veterinarian? And that's the question.
All right, well, I was definitely one of those kids who wanted to be a veterinarian. Probably before I was 9 years old, my mom would say I'd try to torture our home pets playing with their tails and other parts, but I was definitely wanting to be a veterinarian. I didn't quite know what specialty I would be at the beginning. I've always loved animals and gotten along with them better than some humans, so I am definitely one of those that wanted to be a veterinarian from a very young age.
Dr. Ng?
I actually was a late bloomer. I didn't decide to truly become a veterinarian until I was a junior in college. So my parents had to talk with me, what are you going to do with your career? And I said, well, I want to be a biologist. I essentially knew I wanted to work with animals, but I wasn't exactly sure what. And so I had a discussion with a variety of friends of theirs, and they essentially convinced me that if I was going to go into biology, if I didn't get a PhD, I was just going to be a glorified test tube cleaner. So I said, I don't want to do that. And so in the discussion, you know, a DVM just provided me much more options in terms of what I can do. A PhD would have limited me into just one field. I'd be an expert in that field, but there wasn't much more I could do with it. The veterinary medical degree provides so many career options. It's just incredible, and probably the best decision I've ever made.
So like Dr. Sanders, I too wanted to become a veterinarian from a very, very small young age. And we were known as the zoo in San Francisco, which is where I was raised, and we had a whole bunch of exotic animals. I started at the age of 10 raising and breeding chinchillas and sort of had become an authority on them just by happenstance, and had all kinds of reptiles and fish and than your dog, your cat, that sort of thing. And anybody that I could grab of my parents' friends or people who came over to the house, I'd sit them down and tell them a lot about these specific species, where they came from, their biology, their husbandry stuff they didn't really care about, but I did. So my goal had always been to go ahead and go to veterinary school, but I knew that there was only an 8% chance for me to get into my state school, which was UC Davis at the time. So I decided to at least give myself a backup, if you will, and did some graduate training in environmental science and management so that I could at least tie that in with my interest of birds, and then did my master's in avian sciences here at Davis, and then went on to veterinary school. And those backgrounds have helped me more than anything in my career. And I'm one of those people who will be very honest with you about what it's like to be a veterinarian and the challenges and the struggles, but if you ask me, I love it. Practicing veterinary medicine, I'm so passionate about it. It's what I love to do, and I can't imagine doing something else.
Great point, Dr. Brenner. And that leads to my next question specifically for you. So what do people find so unusual or surprising about your job?
I think a lot of people, especially because I get to do work with a lot of different exotic animals, people get excited when they hear that you worked on a tiger or you worked on an alligator. And it is, sometimes I want to pinch myself when I'm doing it. Oh my God, look what I get to do. And I get paid to do this. But I think that there's also another side that a lot of people aren't as aware of, and that is that being a veterinarian comes with an awesome responsibility. Because we have, as some will say, the right, or we have decided to do something called euthanasia, there's a huge burden with that, to make the decision as to when it's appropriate to end suffering or end an animal's life, which we don't have that option in human medicine. And so that carries a huge burden, and some can deal well with it, others don't. And so I think that's one thing when people say, I want to go to vet school because I love animals. Well, that's a part of it, but there's also other parts that are, if you will, the darker parts, that are important to sort of soul search in yourself prior to going there, because you do have to make a lot of tough decisions. And I know, as Dr. Ng can probably tell you, in the zoo world, you've got to also, if you're in a public place like a zoo, you have a lot of people, a lot of eyes on you, and you're going to make a decision with a high-profile animal, and you're going to have to be able to back that up. There are very few other doctors, like in human medicine or in dentistry, that sort of thing, where you have that kind of pressure. So I think that's probably one of those things that is not talked about very often, and to either pre-vet students or even out once you become a veterinarian, of the best ways to handle that.
Aren't you so glad you attended this conference, guys? So the next question is for all the panelists to jump in. What are some ways pre-vet students can gain veterinary clinical experience in your specialties? And I want to start with Dr. Ng.
I think gaining experience in the zoo field is extremely important. I will tell you, though, it is very difficult for undergraduates to get that experience, specifically in veterinary medicine. Unfortunately, most of the programs are geared for fourth-year vet students or maybe third-year vet students at best. There are not a lot of programs out there for undergrads. And I would hope as a profession that we could change that, but I don't see any movement toward that direction, because right now our field is extremely crowded. It is difficult to get into our field, and I don't think the veterinarians want to make it any easier for students to get into that field, to be honest with you. I personally believe, though, that reaching out and talking to students, especially at your level, is important to explain what we do and why it's a great field to get into. So the best thing I can offer you right now is, at a minimum, is just volunteer at your local zoo or sanctuary or wildlife rehab center, anything that works with exotics. I think that's important, and it's important to show that on your resume, that you've made the extra effort to get experience, to show dedication and commitment to working with exotics, and that will play well in terms of your application, and it'll let the application committee know that you are committed to this particular field.
Well, I definitely agree with Dr. Ng that volunteering, especially in your chosen field, is the best thing you can do. I just wrote a very large article on my website about the benefits I got from volunteering when I was an undergraduate. I went to the University of Rhode Island, which is very close to Mystic Aquarium in Connecticut, where I did over 1,500 hours of volunteer work for their fish and invertebrate department, along with their stranding and a little bit for their vet science. But it taught me skills that I couldn't have gotten anywhere else. Like my basic job of how to catch a fish, which I have to do every time I go to see a client, I would not be able to do without my experience working as a volunteer. I mean, you have to do the grunt work. You have to chop up the fruit into minuscule pieces for this critter that won't have it any other way, and clean lots of gross stuff that you never thought you'd have to clean. But then you get to do the fun stuff, like working in the quarantine with all the new animals before they even go on exhibit. I got to help ship animals, and then you get to do all the fun feeding with all the stingrays and sharks and all sorts of fun stuff. So definitely volunteer where you can. If it's a far enough away commute, try to get other students together so you can carpool, but it's definitely worth every extra ounce of effort you give it, and it's probably the reason why I got into veterinary school, just because I was the weird fish kid that they love diversity, so there you go.
I have to agree with both my fellow panelists. I started out, I was very fortunate to go to a high school that allowed us to do externships. And so my first externship was at the California Academy of Sciences, working with penguins and raising the penguin chicks there. Now, I was 14, and that was what I got to do. Today, you do have to be older, but that started everything for me. And then it all came full circle when I come back around, and I'm degreed as a veterinarian, and I'm practicing in exotic medicine, and I run into my previous mentor, and they say, hey, are you interested? We've got some extra hours and we need an associate veterinarian. So I would say that most of my pre-vet school experiences are what I utilize every day in the field, and what has helped me either make connections, get jobs, or just do some of the stuff that I do today. Vet school's important. You learn a lot of important things, but it's the stuff that you do outside that really, I think, can move your career forward.
Okay. So the general tip is just do the work. You'll just really work hard and someone will notice it, and you'll have your spotlight moment, and just grab that moment and really prove yourself. And I followed those advice, and so many emails from all of you telling me that. So I have a really unique question for Dr. Sanders. What is the most expensive koi you ever worked on, and what were you treating it for?
Well, where I work in Santa Cruz is very close to San Jose, which is the major koi hotspot on the West Coast. There are 6 different companies there that import koi directly from Japan. I was up at probably a very, very, very expensive home that had a koi pond the size probably about a quarter of this room. The fish in there started at $10,000. And so he was responsible for fishing them out and putting them in the bucket for me to look at. Unfortunately, they had some very nondescript ulcers, which in fish med could be just about anything. So with that, tested the water quality. We came to think it might have been a copper problem, since he was putting in a copper roof on the gazebo right next to the pond. So since construction on that has finished, the fish have gotten a lot healthier, but definitely working with those expensive koi is a little, you gotta take your time and make sure you're not gonna kill a very, very expensive fish. But thankfully, most of the koi I deal with are not the expensive ones. I get to deal with the ones that most people, I mean, when you breed fish, you're gonna get some really nice ones, you're gonna get some not so nice ones. So when people really love the not so nice ones, it's just the same as working on a big expensive one, but they're loved a little bit more.
Great. My next question is aimed for all the panelists. Surprisingly, a lot of pre-vet students want to know about the veterinarian's undergraduate journey. And the most common question I ran into was, what was your hardest science prerequisite course in undergrad? And how did you overcome that obstacle? And I would like to start with Dr. Brenner.
I would have to say physics. And I was very glad that at the time the prerequisite was only 2 quarters of physics, where pre-med students needed 3. So that made me very happy. I'm not sure why. It was just one of those things that sometimes my brain just didn't wrap around it. But then something like organic chemistry, I really got. And that's the one thing that if you talk to people on admissions committees, that's the one that people struggle with the most. So I think the biggest thing is if you're passionate about what you're doing, you're not, every aspect of medicine, you're not going to necessarily excel at every little area, whether it's biology or physics or chemistry. But what's important is the process of learning how to apply the knowledge that you have. So my advice, if you get into a class where you're really just you're struggling with it, find somebody that it comes naturally to them and sit down and make them your study partner, ask questions, go to your faculty, ask them questions, because sometimes it just takes another different explanation and then it will click. And the other thing is, in general, medicine is taught as a very lecture format. Here's a bunch of information, memorize it, and regurgitate it back to me on an exam. That's how it is that's how it is during. In most schools. Some of that schools now are changing that, which I think is great. So if you don't learn very well that way, which I didn't, it means that you're going to have to put in a little extra effort and seek out faculty that will sit down and help you, or call friends in your classes to sit down, and you're going to have to tweak it so that you learn it the way that your brain works, because we don't all learn the same way, even if we're all interested in the same subject matter.
I think for me, it was biochemistry, definitely the hardest thing that I went through. And I agree with your suggestions in terms of finding a classmate. But I think also one thing for me is, I got through the class, I learned what I needed to learn to get through. But it didn't really make sense to me. And it'll make sense to you once you get into vet school and you figure out how it actually applies to what you're going to be doing. And then once you get to that stage, then you say, oh, now I know why I had to learn that whole cycle. Now it's all making sense. And so, I would encourage all of you, if you have a subject that you're having trouble with, is, be patient, learn it, and at some point it'll come to you as to why they made you learn something that seems so trivial.
Well, for me, like I said, I went to the University of Rhode Island and somehow managed to skirt around all of their requirements. So I took my general marine biology class my last semester of my senior year, and I was so bored. I had taken an entire class on seaweeds for an entire semester, and then we covered them in a week, and I was struggling to stay awake in class a lot. So unfortunately, mine doesn't really have any good life lessons. I mean, there will be some stuff in vet school that you really just don't care to learn. Like me, I went to a school that didn't have any aquatic specialty, and when I was rotating through clinics, I went to Tufts, sorry, not advised for aquatics. We didn't even have an exotics vet on staff. This was not aquatics, this is exotics. We didn't have anybody. So when I was there and I wanted to say, hey, I want to learn fish, and there's nobody to teach it to you, I mean, cat, dog, everything else, that was hard for me because I really wanted something else. But I made it through, and I'm glad I have some of those techniques, especially the surgery. When I'm doing surgery, yes, you can do surgery on a fish. Those skills will translate just the same.
Great. So my other question is towards Dr. Inga specifically. You receive a lot of students from all around the world doing their fourth-year externships. What do you look for when a student contacts you for advice, either through email or approaching you at a conference? What specific things do you look for?
Specifically for me, I've been very lucky in my career. I think I've had some very good mentors that have carried me forward, given me good advice. And one of the things that I've learned very early on is that you have to give back to your community, give back to your profession. And so that's one of the things that I've strived to do, is to work a lot with students at all levels. So starting in the zoo, when I was at the Phoenix Zoo, I used to have a zoo teen. And so it was a teenager. He started with me when he was about 14 years of age. He just came back every summer, and we would go through learning about animals and stuff. And eventually he went to veterinary school at Michigan State and graduated and is currently in practice. I'm just proud that I was part of helping him get to that stage. And so I work with a lot of different programs where I'm always mentoring these students forward. So for me, particularly when you ask, what specific criteria is it that I want to help someone versus not helping them, a lot of it is just the passion in which they ask. If you send me a generic email and say, hey, Dr. Ng, I'm interested in becoming a zoo vet, can you help me? I'm probably not going to reply to that quite as quick as the student who sends me a 1 or 2 paragraph thing that explains, hey, this is why I'm interested in it, this is why it's my passion. Ask me specific questions as to how to get further in this career. Those are the students that I'm going to push as much as I can. But, in terms of the 4th year veterinary students applying for externships, I think a big thing when you're doing that is you have to approach it just like you do your application. Don't just send, the chief vet of any zoo a thing saying, can I be a 4th year student for you? But explain why do you want to be at that zoo versus any other zoo. Explain why you want to be in zoo medicine. Explain why, you deserve that opportunity. Because you guys have to realize that, for every position that we do fill, I probably get 3 or 4 other applications for that one position. And so for me, it's impossible to just look at a piece of paper, looking at just a GPA, looking where you're going to school, looking at some of your history to really discern differences between that. The only way I can do that is by the passion that you put into that letter of intent when you're writing and saying, hey, this is why I want to be there. So that makes a big difference as to why I pick some students over others.
Great. Thank you. With Dr. Brenner and Dr. Sanders, you both interact with a lot of veterinary students. I know you do some ride-alongs with veterinary students, and with your time in California Academy of Science, would you like to jump in and give your opinion of what you look for in students?
Go ahead.
I think my end is I'm not as concerned about what their grades are or what specific classes they've taken. What I'm more concerned about is what their passion is and whether or not they've really made an effort to get as much experience as possible within that. And then with a lot of it, a lot of them come through and they're volunteers or they become biologists and they work as biologists at the California Academy of Sciences. And so what I want to see is I want to see initiative, somebody who doesn't have to be told, you need to go do this, you need to go do this, but that comes to me and says, hey, I noticed this animal was doing this. Would you like me to? And who's proactive about stuff and is thinking, both inside and outside the box, especially with exotics. While there is more research and more information out there published about how to care for these animals, a lot of times we are flying by the seat of our pants, literally. And so you need to be creative and you have to think outside the box and you have to pull experiences you've had, like many of us who had very traditional backgrounds where I was at Davis, you track large animal, small animal, or mixed. So I was small animal. So even though I knew from day one I wanted to do sort of exotic wildlife zoo stuff, you're small animal. So you pull from that information. So I think in general, it's just having that passion and then doing something about it. And asking lots of questions and with a real interest to learn. That's what I look for.
Well, since my company is still new, unfortunately, I've only had 1 student so far. Definitely looking to add more, so if anyone's interested, please stay tuned. But she actually started out as a fellow volunteer with me. I do volunteer work for the Marine Mammal Center. We have a satellite clinic in Monterey Bay, so she was on staff with me, and I mentioned that I was a fish doctor. Her eyes lit up. She said, oh my God, I want to do that. What do I need to do that? So we literally sat down and had a whole afternoon in between fielding crazy calls from the public that this is what I do and this is more about what I do. And then I invited her along. We had a koi surgery not too far from where she lived. She came and had this notebook, and every time I did something, scribble, scribble, scribble. She asked great questions. And then from that, I was able to offer her the chance to come out and do some health checks on some koi. One of my good clients has a very large pond, and when he gets ready to sell his fish, we screen them for parasites, do some basic blood work. So she was great and jumped right in. She was doing the sampling of the skin and gills, and then she even got up to blood samples, and this was on her first time. So her determination and drivenness and really dedication to learning more is really what let me kind of bring her into the fish vet field a little faster.
Great. So just really work. Just really show your passion. That was the most common thread. And, just don't be cool as a cucumber. Just really show your passion and enthusiasm, because that goes a long way. Don't you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So a lot of pre-vet students I talk to and I interact with, they always see veterinarians or their mentors as like this high and mighty figure in their life, but they're always never asking questions like, what were they like when they're my age? So if you could just pick one word to describe your 4 years in veterinary school and tell us the reason why you chose that word to describe your veterinary school experience. And
You can go first.
yes, oh no, Dr. Brenner went first
while
many
ago.
times.
Okay.
Would you like to go first? Do you have a word? Or
A word.
a word?
Can I give a description?
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with Dr.
Okay.
Sanders.
So, I guess my vet student education would be mostly, as a fish vet, would be frustrating. Because like I said, I went to a school that had absolutely no aquatics program. I got laughed at by clinicians when I told them I wanted to be a fish vet. So thankfully, I did a couple awesome summer programs. And I basically found the mentor of somebody who I wanted to be. She is a fish vet up in Buffalo. I went and hung out with her in her practice for 2 weeks. She is the coolest person on the planet, and I'm sure she's always been that way, but she's up on a pedestal, but it's not that high. I mean, I can talk to her as a person, and we hang out at conferences, we grab drinks a couple times, so you don't have to, putting up on a pedestal is always nice as a mentor, but they're people too, and they've struggled through the same things that you're going through. I'm a little more relatable because I've only been out for 2 years, so it's fresh in my mind what fun times you have in veterinary school. And I'm happy to offer myself as a mentor to anybody who's considering a career in aquatics. I'd definitely like to encourage more students to at least get some experience so you can see how much fun it is to be a fish vet.
I think my word would probably be stressful. For those of you who attended my earlier session, I struggled through veterinary school. I'll be honest with you, I'm not the smartest student out there, so I struggled. And fourth year, I was worried that I wasn't going to make it because I was burned out by then. But I did make it, and interestingly enough, right after graduating, I was able to get a job, and I went to the job, my interview, and the guy interviewing me, he asked me what I was ranked in my vet school. And I graduated from Purdue University, and we had a small class of 64. And I told him, well, I'm graduating at number 30. And he said, he told me it was just very nice the way he said it, and I do believe it's true. He goes, well, that's not bad. You don't want to be too book smart, but you don't want to be at the bottom of the list either. So being right in the middle, I like that. And I found that to be true. I think, there are people who have personal struggles for whatever reason, going through vet school or going through any hard time. And I think we need to be sensitive to that. And at the end of the day, the important thing is I got my DVM, and at the end of the day, I also feel like I'm a very good veterinarian. And I've achieved quite a bit in my career despite my struggles. So, if you guys are personally having trouble getting through, high school or college or whatever level of schooling you're at, work through it. You'll get through it, and you can achieve a lot still.
Dr. Brenner?
I think the word I would have to use is tunnel vision, because I'd want to be a vet for so long and had always had an interest in exotics and in particular birds. And so it was like, well, I'm going to become an avian vet, and that's what I'm going to do. And you start in vet school, and a lot of courses you're sitting there going, like you, frustrated because you're not getting enough in what you think you want to do. And so my advice would be, when you go in, it's great to have an interest in a specific area, but keep your mind open. Don't narrow yourself too much. And unfortunately, because Davis has the tracking, it also narrows you. So then I got even more narrowed. And I had actually petitioned to do a very special track, and they had decided, no, we just want you to just do small animal. I go back and forth as to whether that was the right decision. But what I would say is stick to your gut. If you really are passionate and believe in something, push to be able to learn those things. But at the same time, keep your mind open to opportunities that come up, because you never know later on that you might change. And I did, even though I was avian exotic private practice, I found that when I was doing zoo and aquarium medicine, I enjoyed it a lot more, And so now I'm sort of shifting my career, which is much harder to do later on down in your career than early on. And the other thing I would encourage you to do in vet school is when you have the opportunity to do externships, get out of the school and go work in the real world. The best externship I had was in Tenerife and at Loro Park, which is out one of the islands off of Spain, and they had one of the largest collections of rare cetaceans, so parrots, anywhere in the world. And I got to see a Spix macaw, which is, for those of you who know, I mean, extinction, basically, in the wild. So I learned more in my few weeks there than I think I did in my 4 years of vet school. So I really, really encourage people to get outside, your classroom walls and get some experience while you're there.
Great, thank you so much. And unfortunately, I have to take this conversation into a much more serious tone. And I had this really great conversation with Dr. Brenner a couple months ago, and I formed the question based on our conversation. And I can just see she's just ready. What are some financial considerations one must consider when choosing this path in veterinary medicine, especially becoming an uncommon species veterinarian?
I'm going to be a little bit of a downer here.
Just leave the building if you want.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer if you truly want to do something and love doing something, you should do it. And one of the things I always said is if I stop enjoying practicing veterinary medicine, I'm getting out of the field. Because if you're doing something you don't enjoy, it's really tedious. So while I say that, when I went to vet school, I graduated in 2004, so 10 years ago. The economy was good. Vet jobs were plentiful. I had my pick of 5 jobs, decent salary coming out of school. For the people that I've spoken to who have graduated recently from UC Davis, they can't find jobs. It's been really difficult. And that's just, we're talking small animal, large animal. So then when you start going into a more specialized area, it's even more competitive to get a job and find work. So there are 2 aspects. I think one, you have to be passionate about it. And the second is, I think you really need to financially look at, can I afford to go to vet school? And people hate hearing this, but when I mentor vet students and help them with their applications, that's the one thing I say. If you're going to put yourself into so much debt that you're never going to be able to pay it back working, it's going to make it very difficult for you to enjoy what you do. So that's my downer note. There are a lot of different options, so I encourage people to explore it. Go speak with a financial consultant. Go speak with other people that are in the loans department and really make sure, because that's the last thing you want hanging over your head. When kids are coming out $250,000 in debt and the job they can get is paying them $45,000 a year, it's a long road. So I put that out there. But if you're truly passionate and that's what you want to do, there's a way to do it. Just be smart about it.
Aren't you glad she's on the panel? So I would like to end this panel on a really positive but also kind of funny tone. I've been asking every veterinarian I pre-interviewed for every panel or every time I recruited to come to this conference, and I got this really unique answers. I had this one question, because we work with so many different animals, and each veterinarian comes with different stages of their career, that I come up with this question: what is your dream animal that you want to treat? I mean, I heard one person said, I would love to treat a Pokemon. Like, one said, can you imagine if I can just, like, get on my lap race and surf?
Well, I'll start that. I have been very fortunate. I've worked at 3 different zoos, and so I've dealt with a lot of different animals. I'd say probably over 400, 500 different species. And once upon a time when I was younger, if you asked me what my favorite animal was, it was definitely a cheetah, and it has remained my favorite animal for many, many years. But one of the things I've noticed over the years when people ask me that question, I definitely don't respond very quickly to that. I think about it. And what blows me away is just every day when I work with a different animal, I just recognize what is significant about this animal that really makes me love what I do. And it might be the simple thing where, a couple years ago, we got introduced to a rattlesnake that doesn't have any rattles. And it's a rattleless rattlesnake. I never heard of it, never seen it. And I was like, what the heck is this about? And then you find out, well, biologically it sits on this island where it has no predators, so it lost the need for rattles and it never produced them. And it's like, wow, that is really cool. Plus it was just a neat looking snake. And so over the years, I've just found out I probably don't have a true favorite anymore, because I am just amazed at the variety of animals and just the different type of animals out there. And I just feel it's a privilege that I've been able to just work with many of them.
Well, being the fish enthusiast that I am, I would probably have to say great white shark, just because they're awesome. And there's a lot that's not known about them. So being on a research project, learning something new about them would be my fantastic dream critter to work with. I mean, logistics, they're a lot harder to work with than a tiny little betta fish that's this big and you can hold in your hand and do what you need to. But yeah, definitely great white shark would be on my list of things to accomplish in my lifetime.
I've had the privilege of working with such variety of species that it's hard, same thing, of being able to choose one particular species. I think for me, what my goal would be down the road is obviously I want to work with species I may not have worked with before, but more so is to actually go out into the wild and see these animals in their native habitats and watch and observe them. Because with any type of exotic medicine, the majority of our issues that we deal with are husbandry. If you can't get the husbandry right, then we start having medical problems, and then we're just sort of chasing these issues, and until you correct the husbandry. And the problem is some of the species we work with, we don't really know what they specifically need or exactly what they eat in the wild. And so for me to be able to go places, like Africa and in South America, which I've had the privilege of going to a few places and seeing animals in their native environment, and it changed the way I practice medicine. So I would say that would be my goal, or what I want, not a specific species, but being able to see the species I work with in their native environment.
I'm so proud of my panelists. They are so succinct with their answers. We actually have one more time for one more question, and it's a pretty big picture question. Where do you see this field of veterinary medicine in 10 years?
For each of our specialties?
Yes.
I think for zoo medicine in 10 years, I think it will be interesting. There are a couple of different factors that are in play. One would be that our field is gradually becoming more specialized. And so, as I said in my talk earlier, I think zoo veterinarians are the true general practitioners. We see a broad variety of animals. We have to know cardiology, neurology, dermatology, all the ologies about these animals, and be able to discern, what's going on and decide when do I need to bring in a specialist. What I'm seeing in our field is that we are gradually getting to that point where we are specializing and becoming better at it. So I do see people specializing in specifically like anesthesiology. There are specific people that go around the country literally and help us immobilize elephants, immobilize giraffes, immobilize hippos. These are very traditionally difficult animals to work with, and now we have specialists that are able to do that. And so the question, in 10 years, are we going to have the true general practitioner, or are we going to be more like the human health field where we are automatically calling in the specialist right away? That might be one of the things that might occur. I think the other thing that comes into play in our field is how we're perceived by the public. One of the things that we have, especially working in the Los Angeles area, is we have a lot of activists, animal activists. And it's very important to realize that, we all strive to provide the best animal welfare that we can, but inherently there are people that will be against having animals in a captive environment no matter how you look at it. So the question is how is that going to be perceived in 10 years? I see the activists as gaining traction and putting more pressure on zoos to not have animals in captivity. And how will that affect us? It's going to affect us as veterinarians in terms of the level of welfare that we can provide. And I'm not talking just medical welfare now. Now I'm talking about all the other factors, such as the husbandry factors, and are we treating them right? Are we giving them the right food and all this? And so I think it's going to be a lot tougher on veterinarians in the zoo field in 10 years because of those type activities.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to foretell the future?
As far as aquatics go, I definitely see a big grow growing population in aquaculture. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the US right now. And on top of that is also the aquaponic system. If you're unfamiliar with this, it's basically using the waste that fish produce to fertilize vegetables and other fruits and all sorts of stuff. And that's really starting to gain footing now that it's now a more accepted practice. So treating the fish that deal with this system and then a more traditional aquaculture, raising fish on a farm for consumption, is really what's going to kind of start pushing more people to go into aquatics. And the newly formed American Association of Fish Veterinarians is actually looking to add a boarded specialty in fish medicine, hopefully in the next 5 or 6 years. So that's something that I'm looking forward to doing, and I know a bunch of fellow colleagues in the aquatics field are looking forward to as well.
I would have to say that I agree with both my panelists. I think I'll address more the private practice, sort of avian and exotic. It's going to be the same. I think we're really moving more towards specialty practice, very similar to human medicine, which is good and bad. It's great to have these specialists that just are so focused in a certain area, but we're kind of losing the general practitioner, which is still a really important component of veterinary medicine. So I think we're going to see more specialties coming out, and then maybe within our specialties, we're going to even break into more specialties like human medicine has. But I also think the awareness of the public in terms of animal welfare, animal behavior, changing some of the ways that we've taken care of these animals and realizing that it's not been adequate. I think because there's so much more research that's being done now and awareness to this, I think that the field is growing rapidly, much more so than it used to grow. Even in certain things like surgical skills and other stuff, we're doing so many more procedures and we're using a lot of the more modern medical equipment, and we're not lagging behind human medicine by that far. The key is getting it to a point where it's still affordable for your client, because they don't have insurance like you do in human medicine. And while nonprofits like zoos and aquariums, they battle with the financial aspect of it, they have budgets and they're working within something. But your client comes in and wants something done, and you know what you could do, and you know you can treat it, but they can't afford to pay for it. And that's, I think, the hardest thing, and I'm curious to see how we deal with that moving forward, because the type of medicine we're doing is getting more detailed and more expensive, but the clientele can't keep up with that. So it'll be interesting.
Okay. Well, I want to give another round of applause for our Uncommon Veterinarian panel. And I just want to thank you guys for coming, because I know there is so many different talks in this conference, but I think you've taken a big positive step toward your Uncommon Veterinarian dream. And all the speakers will be going outside, but unfortunately Dr. Ng and Dr. Brenner will have to go immediately back. And but does Dr. Brenner have any cards or available?
I'll give you my email address. How's that? And feel free, just let me know that you were here so I know. It's Dr. Serena Brenner, so it's DrSerenabrenner, so all lowercase, @gmail.com. So feel free if you have any questions or you want to know anything, because that's how we got to where we are, to have people that we were able to ask questions to, so we encourage it.
That's the same thing for me. Anyone who would like to contact me, you can get me at lazoovet1@gmail.com. Feel free to email me and just put something in the subject line so it doesn't get caught as spam.
Well, I have nowhere else to be, so I'm happy to talk to people.
Yes.
But if you have somewhere else you want to be, I'll give you my email as well. It's NC, as in Northern California, fishvet@gmail.com. And if anyone's interested in more aquatic student resources, I have a link on my website. It's avsnca.com. There's a whole bunch of resources for students that are looking to learn more about aquatics. So I highly recommend checking that out, at least to get some basic information there.
See, aren't you lucky? I had to go Google search for like weeks to find these people's email addresses.
That's why I made the website.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.